The centuries-old Doctrine of Discovery informed a tradition of white supremacy that has shaped our view of people of color in the United States and across the globe. On this episode of Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, Reverend Petra Thombs tells us how that happened and why it's important that we reclaim our connection to each other and to our rightful history. This episode originally aired August 18th, 2021.
Once again, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene. As you know, as we like to say, Race Talk Revolution is a platform where your voice matters. As you know, I am Eugene Holden. And again, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon or morning, wherever you may be in the nation. Our topic today is the Doctrine of Discovery, reclaiming our rightful history. You know, and our guest today is Indigenous people's rights activist, the Reverend Petra Thombs, and we will be meeting her in just a moment. But, you know, I want to just say this, as always, during our conversation today, we ask that you please remain muted. And then when we get to the Q&A section, we will, we'll talk to you how you can raise your hand. We also want you to remind everybody that Race Talk Revolution is a loving, respectful, and inclusive platform designed to encourage constructive dialogue around tough issues pertaining to racial and social injustice. It is a safe space. It is a brave space for people of all backgrounds to share ideas and your opinions. We get to explore nuances of systemic racism, and then we get to grow our anti-racism muscles. In our Race Talk Revolution community, we practice, get this now, we practice radically inclusive love. Now, just because we don't understand, or just because we don't agree with everything or with what's being shared, but we also want to remember to listen with respect and appreciation and empathy, because that's how we want to be heard as well. Our commitment is that every person be encouraged, every person be heard, and every person be appreciated, because here on Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, every voice matters. And here's my beautiful host, Reverend Lane Cobb.
Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our first-time participants. So happy to see everybody, and so pleased to be able to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. She is Reverend Petra Thombs. And Reverend Thombs is the minister at Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Central Nassau. Prior to holding her current position, Reverend Thombs served as executive director of the Ramapough Lenape Community Center in Mahwah, New Jersey, operated by the 501c3 organization Ramapough Mountain Indians Incorporated. Born in Brooklyn, New York, to parents of Trinidadian and African American and Cherokee heritage, she passionately advocates for the rights of Indigenous peoples and nations. Reverend Thombs received her undergraduate degree from Fordham University, her Master's of Education from Columbia, and her Master's of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary. Prior to pursuing a career in ministry, she completed a 32-year career with the New York City Department of Education, where she held a number of titles, among them special education teacher, program coordinator, assistant director of early childhood education, and assistant principal. While a member of Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains, New York, Reverend Thombs spearheaded a community collaboration project to establish an annual Kwanzaa celebration in that city, which is now in its 14th year, and introduced annual Juneteenth commemoration services to that congregation. Reverend Thombs currently resides in Valhalla, New York, with her husband of 41 years, Bernie. They have two sons, Benjamin and Matthew, a grandson named Finn, and a cat named Esteban. A lifelong poet, she writes about historical, cultural, religious, and personal experiences, expressing the perspectives of marginalized communities. Reverend Thombs, first of all, congratulations. I understand that your position at the UU Congregation of Central Nassau is new, so congratulations on that. And thank you for making time with us this afternoon. So I want to just start out by letting everybody know it is not an exaggeration, I don't think, to say that you are super passionate about fighting for the rights of Black and Indigenous peoples. I have known you for some years. You have always been an activist for the rights of Black and Brown people. I'm wondering if you might start us off today just sharing a bit about your journey to becoming an activist for the rights of First Nations peoples, if you would, before you get into the doctrine.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lane and Eugene, for having me. You know, well, this is part of who I am. And I have always wondered growing up, certainly I had the stories from my mother about having Cherokee heritage. We did not have any connection to that culture. We had the name and we knew the location in North Carolina, but we did not have any cultural tradition that, you know, we were not taught that. My mother wasn't taught that. And so, you know, I was always grappling with that identification. And, you know, at the time when I was growing up, it was not acceptable for Black people to acknowledge being Native. It's almost as if, well, you know, there was the accusatory tone of, if you say that, then that's because you're not accepting being Black. And well, don't put that shoe on me, because that shoe didn't fit me. My heritage of being Black is very important to me, but why should I be denied access to expressing my indigeneity? Why should I not being able to say that I'm of Cherokee heritage? So are you saying that a car company has ownership to that title, but I don't? Something's wrong there. And that was always something that got under my skin in a very big way. And so, you know, time and again, I would be seeking out information to connect me. My husband and I took our children to the American Indian Community House when they used to be on Lafayette Avenue and around Houston Street. We took them there. We had done a number of activities there. We wanted the children to know who they were, that they are African American, that they are Cherokee, that they are Carib Indian, that they are, you know, and they should be proud of all of their ancestry. And we also took the children to powwows. We would go out to the Shinnecock Reservation in Long Island. A couple of years we did that with them. We would make sure that, you know, they got a chance to be able to visit with the powwow, observe the dances, and, you know, to the degree that, you know, we're on the sidelines, but just to be present there. So, you know, it was always something that I felt called to. And when I learned about the Doctrine of Discovery, it answered so many questions for me and that search that I had. And, you know, it was a program on WBAI. I was listening to First Nations Voices with Teokas and Ghost Horse, and it connected me to Stephen Newcomb, Indigenous law scholar. And, you know, I got a copy of the Doctrine of Discovery, which, you know, I have recommended to you, and your participants can access that. They can rent a copy, buy a copy, but whatever. But this is so critical to know this information because it answers those burning questions as to where is the disconnect for me? Why are we not able to know who we are, say proudly who we are? It says it clearly so that I'm not wondering anymore, but I'm wondering what's out there in the general milieu. People don't know this history. There's so much conversation about critical race theory. Well, we don't want to talk about what's really gone on because it's pretty bad. We don't want to know, but we all need to know. We cannot have justice. We cannot have accountability. This is not about shaming and blaming and guilting. It's about knowing and owning truth so that we can do better. Who are we called to as people? And I think this is also part of ministry for me. Who are we called to as human beings? We're called to step into truth. We're called to treat people as we want to be treated, with love and respect. How do we get there in an atmosphere that's promoting what's not true, that's promoting lies, disinformation, that's gaslighting? We've had centuries of that. And we want to be able to get to the truth, because once we know what has taken place, then we can do better. Then we can step up and say, you're my brother, you're my sister. Then we can demonstrate love to each other. Otherwise than that, we're not living in love, we're living in toxicity. So all of that to say, that's how I've gotten to, you know, that expression. It's a fire that's burned in me. And I really just feel that I'm now working, you know, I'm not in North Carolina, I'm here in New York, this is my home, but I'm working with the people whose home is here, whose ancestral land is here, and helping them and understanding where they're coming from. Their struggle is my struggle. And so we're working together to be able to experience sovereignty, experience a beloved community. And that, again, for Unitarian Universalists, that speaks to that eighth principle. How do we get there? We have to be able to know what has taken place so that we can move forward and correct the past.
Thank you. Yes, you know, you're pointing to a lot of things. One of the things I want to say is, when you said a car company owning the name, you were referring to the Jeep Cherokee, right? Is that what you were talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up for people who
Yeah,
are wondering what you were talking about.
That's a real issue for me.
It's an issue.
Stop it with that name.
It should be an issue for all of us.
Not your name. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that you really, that touches me a lot is how many of African Americans, a lot of Black and brown folks have Native American heritage as well, and either don't know or aren't celebrating it because they really just don't know the actual history. So I'm looking forward. You said that the Doctrine of Discovery answered a lot of questions for you, talking about how that doctrine set us up for this history of white supremacy that is just still maintained. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that now, and then we can go through the next series of questions. But what I want to do too is, I noticed that there's folks who have joined you here. Their squares are your name. So if you know how to change your name, please do that. We'd love to know what your name is. But if you don't know how to do that, don't worry about it. And if you have not, I wanted to let people know I did send the link to Stephen Newcomb to his movie. And I will put it in the chat while you're speaking again for people. Okay, it's a tremendous piece of work. You should watch it.
Yeah.
So what about that Doctrine of Discovery?
Okay, so let's paint this picture. Now, I'm going to start here with this. Everybody, I think, here has in their high school learning learned about the Spanish Inquisition. Everyone's learned about that. Am I correct? Do we see hands? Yes? We've all learned about that. We've learned about that, but not the fullest context of that. So take that point in history. That point in history was about 1452. 1452, Spain was looking to make a all-Christian state or country. It wasn't, the country of Spain was in formation, and the Pope really wielded tremendous power. And this was the end of the ruling of the Moors on the Iberian Peninsula. It was the Moors who were being tortured in the Spanish Inquisition. Moors, it relates to their, it relates to their, really their skin color. They were Arab, they were Muslim. Moors and Jews were being expelled. I saw someone put that in the chat. I'm not forgetting, I know who was expelled. Yes, because they were not Christian. And so those who were not were expelled, and those who were captured were being tortured in the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, now they made it really horrific for those who tried to stay, and many did try to stay. They tried to convert in order to stay, and it was horrible for them. But I go to that particular time frame because that is where the first edict of the papal bull by the Pope was sent out to the King of Portugal. And this papal bull was named Dum Diversis. And the directive given to the King of Portugal was to invade, capture, pursue, and vanquish all pagans, Saracens, meaning Muslims, and enemies of Christ, and to put them into perpetual enslavement, taking all of their goods and all of their possessions. They were to be subjugated, they were to be vanquished. So they went into West Africa, not with the thought of trading. That's what the West Africans who welcomed them thought that they were there for, to trade. This was to interrupt that trade route because the Africans were making out very well, very productive in their trade routes, but to interrupt it and to take all of their land and possessions. So this was this beginning of the colonization, if you will. And there were several more toxic bulls that went after that. And you may remember 1493, after Columbus's voyage, when another papal bull was issued into Cartera, where the Pope said, "You good Christian nations, don't war with each other," he said to Spain and Portugal. "Don't war over territory. You're good Christian people." So he created that line of demarcation, and Spain takes one side of the map and Portugal takes the other side. I know we got that in our history lessons, but we didn't really get the finer points to that. So that just really meant that others were going to have to be subjugated. Those, your enemy, the Pope instructed them, are those non-Christians, those pagans, those heathens. That's who you should be up against, those who are not followers of Christ, those who he deemed to be enemies of Christ. And so on the African continent and also in the Western Hemisphere, coming over as Columbus had, to do what they would do to the inhabitants. Columbus's first action when he got off of the boat was to take his spear, raise it to the heavens, and plunge it into the earth in a ritual act of baptism. He was baptizing the earth in the name of the Savior, San Salvador, and promising the land to the king and queen who had financed his tour, Isabel and Fernando. Okay, so this was, and then later he baptized the people. Not because he was really saving them, but because he was preparing them for the work that they would then do in going into the mines and looking for gold, which they never found because there wasn't any gold. And the punishment that followed brought about the genocide on the island of San Salvador. So, you know, that directive to invade, capture, pursue, and vanquish, this is seen again and again. Indigenous people, wherever they were seen, were not considered to be people by Christian Europeans. They were considered to be heathens, and therefore the land, Washington and Jefferson, they considered this land to be up for grabs because these people had not built up their land as Europe had. Clearly, they didn't know what to do with it. So to say that it was terra nullius, that it was null and void, that they did not really exist because they were not worthy of existing, made it very easy to clear the land of them, which was what took place again and again and again. So, and to such a degree that in the 17th century, I believe, we had a mini ice age because there were so many deaths from clearing the land. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So how has that one document has been the basis for many other edicts that uphold white supremacy? I'm interested, maybe you could talk about that, but how has that then shifted or affected the way that people of color are seen in the United States and across the world today?
Okay, so first I just want to mention that just to connect this and how it then perpetuated. So Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence, it's interesting that when it came to the Doctrine of Discovery, as long as they were discovering something, they could claim it. Because if there were people who were not Christian Europeans, they had the right to discover it and claim it. He had said that the infant United States would follow the directive of the parent monarchs of Europe. So interesting that someone who proposed the United States independence was linking himself very closely as an infant nation, taking the counsel and advice and actions of European monarchs, who I thought he wanted to distance himself on, but not in this issue. Not in the issue of claiming land, not in the issue of erasing people who already live there. So it's important to know that that was Jefferson, especially being the architect of the Declaration of Independence. So, in every single thing, especially when it came to Indian law over land rights, the right to exist. The understanding was that if they were not willing to become a part of white society, of this Western culture, then they ought to be destroyed. Those are words by Senator Harkin, I believe, Harkman. And, this goes to seeing them as less because they were not of European ancestry. First saying that they were not Christian, but then saying that really we see white supremacy growing, especially as race takes hold and becomes more clearly defined. After Bacon's Rebellion, that was a time when freed Blacks, indentured servants, fighting against landowners, came together and said, we're not doing well here, and they're holding all of the money, and we need to be able to get our fair share. And somehow believing that they were going to be bargaining in good faith, this was not going to happen. But what did happen was very clear directions on who was going to be privileged and who was not. So separating people, separating them from their economic interests is the basis of our division in the country. This is a place of division. People came here because they were divided from the homelands that they originated from. They came here divided against each other, those who worked and those who didn't work but owned land, and the division continued. For those who were kidnapped from the African continent, I think it's important to use that term because we need to be mindful that this was an international crime that took place for over 200 years, this kidnapping of people from their homes. Even though one could say, well, it's always said that, Africans participated in this, but, those who participated are as varied as all of the nations of Europe. And certainly you would not necessarily expect, people in different areas of Europe to always be on the same page. My goodness, they've been warring for thousands of years. So, you know, the same thing in Africa for those who may have brought people and traded with those who were doing the capturing and making the profits. It's important to remember who was making the profits, because those are the people really responsible for the kidnapping, as opposed to any middle person, middle group of pirates, if you will. They were just middle people, and they certainly weren't making the bulk of the profits from the grand venture of the transatlantic slave trade. So that has to be said. How it impacts, of course, because we see that Africans were kidnapped from their homeland, not because they were a needy bunch in need of conversion, but precisely because their understanding of planting, understanding of Mother Earth, understanding of how to make that work and be productive, it was because their farmlands were so productive and beautiful, which is why, and they were so skilled at it, in spite of the incredible heat and the conditions that they worked under, that they were kidnapped and brought for that purpose. And for the most part, this nation grew wealthy because of their tremendous skill level. And they really only took those who were very skilled at whatever it was that they were doing back in their homeland. So these people were made to do that. The indigenous people, those who they could capture and enslave, were used for the same purpose, but it was really to maintain that same hierarchy that Europeans had escaped. There was the hierarchy of the lord and craftspeople and then serfs. They recreated serfdom here. That was our purpose for being. Our purpose for being kidnapped was, again, to be serfs or worse, because certainly there was no remuneration for enslavement, and it was to be permanent. This was to permanently uphold the aristocracy. And when we were no longer useful in that way, that's when we saw much of the negative behavior against us in terms of, things that were passed during the Jim Crow era for us to continue to be subjugated socially. That again is vanquishing, pursue, vanquish, subjugate. These things, again, we're seeing to keep people in a low place so that you can maintain power. This was a matter of a power dynamic. There were indigenous people who were Cherokee who were not on the Trail of Tears. There were always those who were left behind. There were those who were taken and put on plantations, as my family was. That was very typical to have happen. And as you had said, Lane, yes, many of us do know that we have indigenous heritage. Whether we do the DNA test or not, we know that maybe from family stories, and connecting with that. It's a painful connection. It's also particularly painful because we recognize that when people identified as indigenous, it meant to whites hearing that they could have land claims. And that meant their lives were going to be at risk. Very often, their lives were at risk. And they were, people were killed for that. Early on in the country's history, in the cleansing, if you will, and the taking of land, there was tremendous scalping that went on by Europeans against indigenous, because that was proof that they had killed them. There was $7 for a man's head, $5 for a woman, and $3 for a child. And as many as they could load up in a wagon or whatever, this is what took place. This is how the land was cleared. And so, yeah.
Thank you. There is a movie I have not seen called Exterminate All the Brutes. I think that is
I've heard of that. Yeah. Yeah.
speaks to that process.
Right.
I wanted to see if we can turn now to the whole thing about the myth of white supremacy kind of being passed down, and how we unfortunately have internalized that quite a bit. It's been very damaging, of course, when you take people out of their history, you take the land away, you take their stories away. We know how Indigenous children were shipped off to Indian schools, and
Yes.
that all
Yes.
of that now is in the news, finding the burial grounds, and just the horrific
Right.
treatment of folks. And when you and I first spoke, we're talking about part of the struggle of equity, of
Mhm.
gaining equity, is restoring our history and telling our stories.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how do you see that playing out in your community?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, as much history as we can, starting with, I always begin with talking about the doctrine of discovery. Because of the land struggles, I know particularly for the Ramapough, because of the land struggles that they themselves have had, and many communities have had, it's important to understand what the marching orders have been. The marching orders have been that directive from Dum Diversis. And, it's always said, we were just following orders. They were just following orders. So there's that. But I think that, okay, I'm just trying to get a moment here. There is a book that had been a common read for the Unitarian Universalists, and a people's history, Indigenous people's history of the United States. And what I so love about that, because it does talk about all of these things that went on, but it also begins by framing the history that took place of indigeneity prior to colonization, so that people could look to say, yes, that's who we were. That's how we operated. There were trade routes. There was the way in which Indigenous people managed the land so that there was not the overgrowth and the wildness that Europeans talked about. That wildness really took place because when people were being moved away from their ancestral land, then there wasn't that tending to the land as they had been doing, recognizing, the invasive species, recognizing those plants that they wanted, medicines that they wanted to cultivate. They took care and they understood, and they were always looking to be in balance because that was part of the tradition and the culture. And so being moved away from your ancestral land, you're moved away from taking care of the earth as you are being required to do. So, there's an understanding that it really does help to understand, so who were we before that? It's really akin to when we teach, middle school children, as I have, about slavery, that I don't begin with that. I begin by talking about the kings and queens of Africa and who they were before being taken here and kidnapped, so that they understand, no, that does not define our people. This is who they were prior to this invasion taking place. And it's important for people to know the essence, where they came from, so that it's not all subjugation. And I think that that's important. Yeah.
Well, one of the things you mentioned was how often Indigenous peoples get questioned about their lineage, right?
Right.
That was interesting to me. Say a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, and it's upsetting, awkward, and painful. People are constantly saying things like, well, what does that mean? I have had people ask questions about the Ramapough. Well, they're darker skinned. okay, so let's see if we have an understanding of this. Let's go back in history to recognize that Verrazano, okay, long before the rest of the United States was occupied, came up the river and saw the Lenape people. They were tan and brown skinned people. And these people are tan and brown skinned people. And there may be some mixing, but that does not stop them from being who they are. But remember, United States has their one drop rule. And so they want to be able to apply the one drop rule. And that's another reason for someone like me to say, well, do I have the right to name myself? That was my question as a child. And it was like, wait a minute, that's the one drop rule, but I'm not going to allow that to take away what my mother is telling me about her heritage, and so there is that issue, people needing to define other people, people needing to say, oh, well, you don't look like, well, who are you thinking that we look like? Because people on the East Coast are, Eastern Woodlands people are not Dakota people. They are not Dakota people. They are not the people in the Midwest. They don't look like the people in the Midwest. They look like the people in the East. Why would one assign to us another way of looking? However, the United States has taken that broad brush and decided that they would bring over Italians and put wigs on them for spaghetti westerns. So you don't know who we are, what we look like, because you've made it up. That's a problem. And so, these are the things that are in people's minds when they see Westerns and they decide to attach, oh, well, then that's the way natives look. And that, everyone is wearing the headdress. That is not the headdress of the Ramapough. That is not the headdress of other Eastern nations, and so people need to be able to define themselves. We have gotten to the era where people who are two-spirit are demanding that we use our pronouns so that we are all vulnerable to say who we are. And please, in terms of our ethnicity and our identification ethnically, each individual needs to be able to define who they are. It isn't for the questioner to define.
One of the things that I know about the Native American community is there is some really, really strong activism happening. Oh, yeah. And right. It doesn't, you don't hear about it. It's not national news. I mean, there's some, what do you say about that?
It's like I'm hearing little cracks from now and then in the media that I do listen to. I will hear Black, Latinx, and Native Americans, probably in that order. So they are at least mindful enough to not leave us off the list altogether. So there's the beginning inclusion of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. There's the beginning inclusion of that. In my understanding, Indigenous people should be named first because they were always here. They were always here. And there needs to be that consciousness raised to recognize we've always been here. And, the activism is making itself seen in some ways. We are starting to hear, people acknowledge some of the struggles that are taking place. We're hearing about the children and those boarding schools, and as the voices are being raised about the children, we know that they have yet to begin to go through the United States and see what's happening on the grounds of where those boarding schools had been. But we are seeing that the consciousness is being raised. And so, we need to continue to push and advocate. I am really looking to see that the car company stops using my name that is something for people to get behind, whether it be a color of change, you know, advocacy that begins. It needs to be that they stop using my name. They're not Cherokee, and stop profiting off of that name. They seem it, you know, anyway, I could go off on that, but you know, stop it.
You know, so seeing, you know, Reverend Petra, thank you so much for all of this. And as we're starting to get into, you know, educating, you know, people and coming to see what, you know, what has been going on for a long time, and then getting into the solutions, I'm wondering if you can share some ways in which we can engage with the Indigenous community.
Okay. Well, you know, there are a lot of powwows that are starting up again. Hopefully that we'll be able to start up safely. We did not have a powwow, of course, last year, and many nations didn't because of COVID. And COVID has, you know, impacted the community to some degree. But, you know, I think certainly I can share with you, you know, our powwow information from the Ramapough Lenape Nation. We will be having a powwow in the end of, that's one way, because that's a matter of supporting, also participating in seeing culture take place, seeing some ritual and traditions, and being present with people.
Right. Reverend Petra, just real fast, because of how some people have been brought up to look at how Indigenous people look. I mean, like you said, you know, that's not the headdress of this particular, you know, nation, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we hear the word powwow, mm-hmm. right? So if you don't mind, it's just because there may be more than just one person, I mean, more than me, who would like some clarification on what that word really is about. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you know, for the Ramapough, it's a family gathering, and it's an opportunity to. It is a fundraiser too. That's a fact, but it is really family gathering and an opportunity to come together in a spiritual way, to come together in a prayerful way, and to be able to participate in culture. So, you know, there's traditional drumming that takes place, there's traditional dances that takes place. And at powwows, we invite people from other Native nations to come join. We come together. It isn't only Ramapough, but people from other nations participate as well. Other Native nations participate in coming to powwow and supporting. And see each other as brother and sister in this struggle, really. But you know, it's a celebration as well, a celebration of culture and you know, and traditional foods, and so, you know, there are many vendors there and that type of thing, but and educational pieces as well. I'm hoping to be able to have a table and have people come and talk about some of the issues that they have in the school system, because they have a lot of issues in the school system. Mm-hmm. They don't feel that they are seen, that their children are seen and respected. And parents have been talking about that for a long time. And I want to be able to connect with them and to be able to address some of those concerns and connect with the school system in terms of this has to be addressed. How are we dealing with this? This cannot be ignored. These voices cannot be ignored. We have to make some correction here.
Yeah, I love how you segue into my next question, right? What other types of projects are you personally engaged in, or are you taking on?
Well, one thing that is something that we started very recently with a number of the women is a Sister Spirit Circle. And it is an opportunity for Indigenous women to come together. We really only had our third meeting, and we're coming together to talk about culture, heritage, sharing the information that we know, each one sharing with each other, elder women sharing with younger women in order to be able to begin to practice tradition, and share with each other certain practices. We begin with smudging, using sage to, for cleansing purposes. And we begin with prayer to the 7 directions. We also, there's a reading from Indigenous wisdom keepers, and we have conversation about where we are and what we may have learned and what Spirit has shared with us or taught us in our own journeys, as well as, hearing from elders traditions that have taken place. And, and also we've been talking about creating regalia. Regalia is, it's what Spirit may call a person to wear that embodies their indigeneity. So you may see, certain things. Some people are able to wear buckskin. That's not necessarily what Ramapough people wear. It's really more cloth. And so it may be a ribbon dress or something like that. There may be a particular fan. There may be a shawl that we wear. There may be a medallion that you wear. There may be certain earrings. I tend to wear these earrings and this medallion. There's certain things that we wear in order to be able to show Indigenous pride in who we are and to celebrate and to honor our ancestors. So there's different things that we may do in order to be able to hold to our heritage.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to open this up now for some Q&A, just real fast. Just a reminder, if you want to raise your hand, take your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, go to reactions, click on reactions, and click the raise hand button. And I will then, of course, call on you in the order that you guys have logged in on, like Neil is first. Love the background, Neil. And then if you cannot find that on the reactions button, then go to your participants button, click on that, find your name. Then as you highlight that, there is a more button, and then see if you can find raise your hand on that. If you cannot find it on those 2 ways, then let's just go to the old way of just raising your hand. Okay, but we would prefer going the first 2 ways if possible. Okay. Neil.
Yes, thank you. First, thank you, Joe, for inspiring my background. And I have a question. Are non-Indigenous people welcome at the powwows?
Yes, allies are welcome at the powwow. Yes.
And do you have any recommendations for how we could do that respectfully?
I do know that we haven't been back when we did have powwow, that we invited allies to come and celebrate with us, observe the ceremony that is taking place, bring who you are. You're coming in a respectful way. And I think that that is what's needed. I couldn't tell you more than that. Because I think the essence of that is clear. So you're coming and you're supporting the nation, contributing to the nation, visiting the vendors and those types of things, and supporting, those who are performing, doing their sacred dances and so forth, and cheering them on. So I think that, it's fine for you to come to the powwow. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great.
You're welcome.
Robert, I know that you're up, but let me go. There's a question in the chat that I want to read from Sarah Lutterot, who says, how is it that the Protestant colonists in North America felt bound by the doctrines coming from the papacy? Was it just a matter of convenience? That is it that it suited their purpose in taking possession of the land?
Well, the directives that were given were directives from the monarch. And, you know, they were not following necessarily the Catholic directives, but they were following Christian directives. So the monarchs made sure that it worked for them, and the people were truly believing what they were told. Not all of them. There were those who did not buy that because they could see that these were people, but there were those who followed the directive of their leaders. And so that's what they did. That's what they did. Does that answer your question? Just want to be sure.
One of the things that points to is how long ago systemic racism started, right? And it really kind of, you can say, well, it wasn't about racism, it was about, but that's the point, right? It's like systemic, and setting up for that separation and that self-service of white supremacy and the economic well-being of the European countries, and then in the United States as an extension of Europe, right? And so what you were saying was, well, not everybody. Well, that's why racism is not about individual acts of prejudice. Right. That's exactly what that points to. So
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly
thank you for that.
Yes.
So we have Robert Harris, and then we have Cody Kirkham, and then I'll go back to the chat.
Okay.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Reverend Thombs, for your work and for your presentation today. I know as a Black man, I personally feel in a funny kind of bind, because when I regard Native peoples, I feel like their treatment generally by, quote, Americans has been an abomination. And so I wonder if, and yet when I think of, well, what solutions might there be? I feel like maintaining the integrity of Native culture and Native lands is really important on one hand, and yet we don't hear about it, as today when you talked about there being a lot of activism among Native peoples, which I had not heard until you just spoke right now. So I'm wondering if you've envisioned what one pathway might look like to, if nothing else, just a better alliance between Blacks and other people of color, or allies, and Native people, while maintaining the integrity of Native culture and lands.
You know, thank you for that. I think that it is very challenging. It's almost as though, you know, when I think to myself how I managed to be connected to the Ramapough, you know, and how I managed to get involved with certain things, you know, it's not right out there available for someone to just, you know, walk up. It didn't happen in that way. I met the chief when I was at seminary, and I was doing my field ed experience for an organization called the Center for Earth Ethics, which was on the campus of Union Theological Seminary. And the head of that is, the director of that is Corinna Gore. She had gone to Standing Rock, and Chief Perry had gone to Standing Rock. And so when they came back, Chief wanted to open up a prayer camp in support of what Standing Rock meant, what activism was happening there. And so that's how I became involved. It's a happenstance in a way. So, but you know, there is the American Indian Community House. Because of COVID, I'm not totally sure how they're operating. I know that they're down in Chinatown now, actually. smaller organization. But what I want to be able to do is get together some resources for people to be able to reach out as allies and connect, because I think that that's what you're asking for. How can you? And certainly, you know, in terms of, you know, information I could share about the Ramapough, that, you know, you could get involved. The Ramapough are in New Jersey and in New York, because they existed before there was a New Jersey and a New York. And yeah, and so, and actually the ancestral land is much more than that, and still holding on or trying to hold on to what they do have. But, you know, just to try to, you know, connect people to indigeneity and different websites. You know, the Shinnecock, they're getting some things done at the Shinnecock, and that's their powwow is coming up. It's usually Labor Day weekend. And so that's another nation that you could absolutely connect to. Got to watch that traffic going out there, though. It's brutal. It's brutal in Long Island, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
We're going to go to Cody, and then I'm going to go to Gail's question in the chat. Then we'll come back to Joe. Cody.
Yes, good morning. I'm not Cody, I'm Cleo.
Hey, Cleo.
Here. Good morning. I'm here with Cody and Reverend Thombs. I really respect your faith and your humanity and your reliance on love. But as a 71-year-old Black man in the United States of America who spent 39 and a half years as a California police officer, I swear, at what point can we just accept the fact that we could learn all the facts in history? Everybody could learn them, and it would change nothing in this country. Facts do not matter. That only two things matter in this country: the maintenance and the expansion of actual white privilege, and the maintenance and the expansion of perceived white supremacy. And you can talk about this, about the evil, but that this country was founded on murder and rape and pedophilia and kidnapping and robbery, and I could go on. And still, over 90% of the people in this country would say, well, you know, the ends justify the means. And so, and I can think of I'm sorry, it hurts my heart, but I can think of my African ancestors listening to their holy people who said, hey, this evil will not consume us. These people coming in and taking us, these people who even look like us, taking us and turning us over to this evil, this will not stand. This will not continue. We will overcome this. Our higher powers will help us overcome this. God, it isn't true. It doesn't mean there are not higher powers. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have faith. But I swear, when does it get to a point where talking about all these facts and history and what just makes us become enablers? What would happen if we just shut the hell up and let people realize that this is not going to change? The people who are in power and in control, they don't care about facts. They don't care about beliefs. They don't care about faith. They don't care about love. They care about one or two things: keeping what they have and keeping the rest of us believe that they deserve it. And I swear, at some point, we just have to believe that all of this talk is just to make us feel good. It's not going to do anything to change this evil.
You know, I feel your pain, and it is real. I hear you, and I feel your pain. And I think I think for myself that I hold on as tightly as I can to Creator's hands. For what it is, I believed when I was 5 years old and I was being raised Catholic that I wanted to be a priest, and there was no way in hell that was gonna happen. No way. And Creator found a way for me. It had to be after my 32-year career in the Department of Education, which was baptism by fire. I'm saying, you were in the police department, I was in the New York City Department of Ed. Okay. For those who wanted to set children up to fail, yes. But they didn't all fail. They didn't all fail. And I would teach them this history, and they knew something, and they grew. And my kids were special ed kids, people who they threw them away. I knew that they could. I held Creator's hand, and we moved. And now, in spite of being raised Catholic, I'm Unitarian Universalist, and now I'm a minister, which I aspired to when I was 5 and was told that's never going to happen. I can't take never as an answer. As a special ed teacher, I could never take never as an answer. I had to believe, because I needed those children to believe that they could. And they did. And they did. And I'm proud of my children. I still have children. They're not children. They're 40-something years old. But we still connect. It's not for nothing. As hard as it is, we go forward. It's not impossible. And we have to find a way. We have to find a way to believe, because otherwise, why do I even get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah.
I have to. I have my Ramapough family, and now I will have my UUCCN, Central Nassau in Garden City. I have to, because Creator is leading me, and Creator tells, I don't play. Creator says, you're going to do something, and made it possible. Now, I told Lane how I got to this. The priest I knew growing up, and I only have good priest stories. The priest I knew growing up is the cousin of the board president at UUCCN. When I saw that man, I said, oh my God, he looks just like so-and-so. And he told me his name, and I said, you're related to Father Rolicky? I can't make this up. So now I am going to be the minister at that congregation. I think that the ancestors are conspiring. I believe in my ancestors. They're the ones who pushed me forward. I believe in my ancestors. With all that we have survived, we're still here.
Come on,
The
man.
Ramapough are still here. People wanted to wipe them off the earth. They're still here. And they're thriving. No, we don't say no. We don't give up, because there's a higher power that tells us what's going on and to keep it moving.
Yes. Cleo, thank you so much for that. Whew, powerful, good stuff. And that's just the thing, right? Yes, the talking is good. The education is good, because we want to be informed. You know, one of the things I say is, you know, my second question is, what's mine to do? My first question is, who am I to be in this? Who am I to be? And when I realize and recognize who am I to be, now that informs what's mine to do. You know, you've heard me say before, those who have been with Race Talk for a while, that when Lane and I first started this a year ago, that for the first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, this was a difficult thing for me personally. I didn't want to do it because I felt like, number one, it was painful to look at all of this once again. And does it really matter? And what I came to realize, people, is that it does. It does. You know, and this is why we're here. We're here doing the work. Cleo, I understand, man. I get it. I get it, man. Yeah. I want to read Gail's question that she put way back at the top of the hour, the first quarter of the hour. What has been the role or influence of assimilation, good or bad, for Indigenous culture and its community?
Well, it's been colonization, and there are those who are colonized. We have all drunk the Kool-Aid to some degree, and it's been difficult and painful. And there are those who want to remember who they are and want to stand for their traditions and culture and hold on to them. There are those souls who are the keepers of those traditions and want to share them with the young, with the youth. We believe in the seventh generation to come and are always looking to say, how can we go forward? How can we prepare ourselves for the seventh generation to come so that they will have a sense of who they are, they will know who they are, they will have what we have left for them. And so, you know, we're always looking to prepare for them. And so part of this connecting to tradition and Sister Spirit Circle is in order to be able to prepare the gifts that we want to give to the seventh generation to come. We are ourselves the seventh generation, and we are living into what our ancestors have wanted for us, that we be the keepers and those who prepare and hold the traditions to give to those who are yet to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Petra. My friend Joseph, I saw that your hand was up, but now it's not.
Yes, I just took it down. I would like to make a comment, if that's okay, Gene.
Yeah, then we'll go to Leah. Yes, Joe.
So, Petra, so good to see you again, and congratulations on your appointment in Nassau. It's great news. You know, I was going to ask you a question about education and what you think is a good strategy for how to inform congregations and get people to listen to and understand history. But I have to tell you, I don't want to ask that question anymore. I just want Cleo to hear my expression of tremendous sorrow that he's feeling that level of despair. I'm sorry that anyone would be hurting like that. And I feel sorry. I feel awful about it. I do, and I don't know if I can inspire any flicker of hope, but I think there are people that look like me that over the last couple of years have reached a tipping point where they've changed from being an observer to being an activist, and being mindful to be an ally and to be respectful, but to do something about the injustice that Cleo described so well. It was just devastating to hear any human being describe with that emotion how much they're hurting. And it's a common thing that I run across in the work that I do in my community, but that's it. Another emotional race talk experience. And I know Cleo, I don't see Cleo any longer, but I hope that someone might pass that along. And he has, there is help out there. It's hard to ask for patience.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Leah, before you go, Reverend Chris Long, I saw that you had your hand up a few minutes ago. Did you want to chime in here? And then Leah, you're up next.
I think Leah was before me, if that's okay. I'm wanting to hear more.
Okay. All righty, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Leah?
Hi, Reverend Petra. Thank you so much for your talk. I'm also a Unitarian Universalist in Hudson Valley. I just also wanted to respond to Cleo because I really appreciated thinking about the history of white supremacy and I mean, although I've heard this, I've been studying a lot, so I've heard it much. But what struck me is that white supremacy and where it came from, and Christian Europeans wanting to permanently uphold the aristocracy. And I see it still happening today, you know, and it's good to know where it comes from. And that's why I joined the Poor People's Campaign. Not only, you know, not only are Black people getting harmed by this and held in a lower economic, social status, but white people are too, unbeknownst to them, possibly. And I think if we all join together, I think historically Black and, you know, working class Black and white people have been held apart from each other and taught to not join forces, because if we did, we'd be a formidable force for the aristocracy to deal with. And I think that's what we're doing now. Hopefully this movement keeps going and we can join together. And Cleo, I you know, it gives me hope just to come here and think I'm making connections and that we are joining together and we will become a force that the aristocracy can't hold down anymore, and that the future looks brighter. So hang in there, Cleo. Thank you.
And not just Cleo, right? Reverend Chris.
I just am humbled to continue to study with Reverend Petra as a colleague of mine. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister a year here in Midtown Manhattan, and just the realities of the current demographic shifts over the last decade of Black people leaving New York by the thousands because of, we know the reasons, but I mean, how your very skilled presentation, so soulful and rich on so many levels. I'm learning, I wanted to make a comment more than a question, that the separations that our society make are gratefully through relationship building and going and resting and sitting and observing. I've had the privilege of witnessing 3 different powwows in 3 different Indigenous communities. They're all so radically different, and the way that they worship and pray and dance and sing. So just a comment that I'm deeply moved, printed out the Doctrine of Discovery as we were talking, and just the language, right, and how eloquent it was at dehumanizing with every stroke of the ink pen that they wrote with, and whatever the language, the original language was. So I'm challenged, I'm nourished. Yes, the realities of Black maleness in this country are equally as horrible. We have to avoid oppression Olympics, right? We have to breathe, we have to have spaces to scream out and share out as Cleo did so soulfully. So I just wanted to comment on how nourishing this is for my journey here in New York City, which has been utterly painful. And all this glitz and glory, the pain is ever so present. And the pandemic only worsens my analysis after being here. So thank you, Reverend Petra. Thank you to the Race Talk folks. Y'all are kicking ass. Can we say ass in this room?
You just said it
You
twice.
just did.
So
You said,
Sorry.
twice now.
Don't ban
So
me just yet. Don't kick me off just yet.
so I guess that would be a hell yes.
All right. Can we get a song? I got one. Never mind.
Never mind. I wrote a song about it. I want to hear it. Here it goes. Before we go to Seizure, there's a question Virgie Cooper asked in the chat. How you doing, Virgie? Can allies participate in this, where'd he go, sister circle? Can the allies participate, Reverend Petra, in the sister circle that you referred to?
You know, this is a time when Ramapough women are coming back together. And in this instance, because it's so rare for the opportunity, we're always in spaces with other folk, but never enough ever alone together to be. Because of my position and also being Indigenous, I'm leading the circle, but I'm not comfortable with saying no, but I'm trying to get there because this is a time of healing for the Ramapough women. Healing and learning what they had not been taught, because, you know, they're on that work grind of just, you know, go to school, go to work, and feed your family. And the time for culture and tradition has been weaned out. And we're trying to bring it back in. So I hope you're understanding, you know, what my heart is saying to you, that at this time, there may be another time for a broader circle of women to gather, because women as a whole need to be able to come together and have circles, you know, and share and learn. But specifically, this is for the healing of this nation's women.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have Seja, hope I pronounced that right, and then Tanya.
Yes, you pronounced it fine. Two things that come to mind. Initially, I was married to a man of Chippewa descent, and only after his death did I happen, well, I guess it didn't exist before, but there was a museum built in the middle of Michigan, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, which commemorates the Chippewa life and history. And it is something that you just have to walk through in silence. It breaks your heart.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that stood out to me was understanding my own husband and his daughter and his mother and the kind of people they were. The biggest harm in my awareness was that the children who were sent to the schools to be assimilated, as a result, never learned to parent themselves. So they had no parenting skills as adults because they had never been exposed to healthy parenting. And that was just stunning, really, because it made everything much clearer. And that brings me to the other part of that, which is that this group and other groups I'm in very much help to make these things clearer. And it is only when I get it on a gut level or a heart level that I can see in my own behavior and my own beliefs little ways that I need to change or need to look at it as ego speaking instead of heart speaking, perhaps. And I think the first episode that you did here meant a lot to me because I had read some books about how to move through my own racist feelings as a Caucasian. And yet it wasn't until I came to this group that I heard you, Orlene, talking about approaching our own biases with love. Having compassion for ourselves, just noticing, because we do hear it, little things. So some people don't know that they hear it, but just owning it with ourselves. We don't to start with, and then later, sharing it with others. I think it's important to share with others in a safe context, because that's when really you could feel the shift inside as well by being so vulnerable. So I thank you for giving this opportunity to explore that as deeply as any one of us wishes to go. And Thank you for being here.
Sasha, thank you so very much. Yeah. You know, this is deep work, right? And here's the thing, right? It takes love. It takes an unconditional love for self to do this deep work. You know, when I say unconditional love, for me, that means no matter what. No matter what. This is good stuff. Thank you so very much. Ooh, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to speak, Lane. I put in the chat something, it's actually channeling Ibram Kendi. So I just wanted to point out, you must notice that the Doctrine of Discovery came from the top. That if we want to focus on increasing equity, we have political access, and what Dr. Kendi is seeing is that policy comes from the top, and then attitudes are adopted by people based on the policy. So we have an opportunity. We have political access. We have to vote. We have to get other people to vote. We have to phone bank. We have to text. We have to support candidates that represent the needs of Indigenous and African American people. We, you know, just getting a Secretary of Interior who is Indigenous person has made so many changes in a completely short amount of time. So I plead with you to please notice that you have power. So far, we're a democracy. We can keep it a democracy. It's not a very good one, but it's a democracy. You have access, use it. I write something every single day to make some kind of political change in this country. And you can take 10 minutes a day and write your senator. That doesn't take very long, and just tell them what you want. And if you don't get what you want from your senator, get a different one. Look at Stacey Abrams. Look at all the work that she's done.
Amazing.
So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, I wanted to just mention, because you mentioned voting, because this was on my mind, that how are we seeing the Doctrine of Discovery in our present moment? It's voter suppression.
Mm-hmm.
It is taking away the voice of those who elected not the person that they wanted elected. So they are going to stifle that by subjugating our voting. They're looking to vanquish our vote. So that's the Doctrine of Discovery today. And also when it comes to gun legislation.
Right. Yeah, true.
So they want to stifle the vote, but no matter who is killed or how many, the guns stay and continue to proliferate. That is the Doctrine of Discovery. To invade, capture, pursue, and vanquish. That's those guns doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. We have Douglas, and then we have Freedom.
Thank you. And thank you, Reverend. I have a daughter who's 38 next week. I remember her first day in school when we moved from Arizona, and I moved back to New York. Right in her classroom, they were doing a unit, and the teacher,
Doug, it's hard to hear you. Can you?
There are no
Douglas?
longer
Douglas?
any Indigenous people
He can't
here.
hear us. He's frozen.
Yeah. Douglas, the connection is a little slow.
And said,
Yeah.
Hopi from the
So I'm gonna, he can't hear us.
Mahwah.
Thank you.
Yeah, his bandwidth is low.
Yeah,
And
although he's still
the
coming through.
teacher said, no, you're not. Douglas Carey is your father. You're not Hopi. And I was just starting a
Interesting.
Can you?
Hang on. I'm gonna do this.
Sorry. Yes.
Doug, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, your bandwidth is off, so we're having a hard time hearing you. If you turn off your video, it will probably be easier for you to be heard. Okay, try that
Okay.
now.
Can you hear me now?
It's not that much better.
Hello?
Doug, try it now, Doug, and then we're gonna have to move
Can you
on.
hear me?
Yes, yes, share
I'm
now.
talking right now, but. Okay. Okay. You can hear me now?
Okay, let me say this, Doug. Do me a favor, put
Can you
share.
hear me now?
We really can't hear you. Go ahead and put your share into the chat, and we're going to move on to Freedom just because we're so close to the end of the show. Put your share in the chat for me, for us, please.
Freedom.
Well, I just want to thank Lane and Eugene for another quality session. You guys have been blowing it out the water since the summer. You haven't let up. Please, can you provide how we can financially, if we'd like to, support in the chat? I think you provided it before, but I may have missed it. And I just want to also thank the speaker, Petra. Thank you for highlighting for me things about a faith that I was
Freedom, you muted
I
yourself.
really
Oh, there you
didn't
go.
question because it's something I was asked not to question, but at least the historical understanding of how it's impacted even current and historical outcomes for people of color and what how that looks. And thank you, Eugene and Lane, for continuing to provide this platform, because when we are tired or we get angry or we want to channel some type of energy, this platform continues to provide that place. And to all of us who get tired, because we all get tired, to Eugene, to your point, because advocacy, activism, and killing racism takes a lot of energy. Also, living life takes all the other parts of our energy. So thank you for this platform, because when we need to have an emotional outlet or connect to other faces that look like us, don't look like us, who have similar stories, this is a platform that continues to provide that level of quality. So thank you all for what you have continued to do for the last several months, and thank you for the speaker.
Thank you so much, Freedom. Appreciate that so very much. Lane, what do you want to do about addressing the question about people financially supporting Race Talk Revolution? Because we're still working on the back end of that.
Right. Well, we're having technical issues with the website that we launched, which has a donate button. However, if you'd like to donate, you can just reach out to me by email and I will let you know how to do that. We will absolutely accept donations. We are expanding our team. We are expanding our brand. We are very, very pleased that you all have been so enthusiastically supporting us spiritually, financially, spreading the word. Just thank you so much for everything that you are providing. We truly feel that we are a family. We are on a mission. We are creating a movement, and we need all voices to be heard and all boots on the ground. I want to thank today Reverend Petra Thombs. Thank you so much for gracing us this afternoon with your message and your presence. And thank you for accepting our invitation. I know that you're a busy woman. I'd like to give you, do you have a 30-second close? Because I know I have something else that I need to do. Just want to let people know who's coming next week, but I want to make sure you get to say your last words.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciated, this format, the forum, the community that you have built. This is so important for people to be able to be in conversations. This is community building, and it's essential work, because our confusion continues because we don't have enough of this. So continue doing what you're doing, Lane and Eugene. People need this. They need the opportunity to come together just to be able to hear each other and be heard. And it feeds the spirit, it fills the soul, and it's just so important. The only other thing that I wanted to say is to, please read the essay that we provided from Dr. Eileen DeFries on Indian heads, because that is the next to do. We need to be able to let go of Indian mascots. They are hurtful, they are harmful, they are insulting, they are remnants of genocide. It is a good thing for us to work to do something better in order to really be respectful of indigeneity. Indigenous nations deserve that respect, and taking these things away, even though people may say, but our mascots are respectful of, no,
Right.
They're comfortable for you.
Right.
They're not comfortable for us. And even if you get a colonized person, indigenous person, to say, I think it's all right, it's not all right. Okay, just saying. The New Jersey Commission on Indian Affairs has that essay up on their website in support of the movement. And in New Jersey, there must be 60 or 70, I think Eileen told me there must be about 70 schools with mascots. Please, we must do better. We must come to an understanding. And so that could be a topic for a whole other day, just saying.
It is a topic for a whole nother day.
It is a topic for a whole nother day. And
thank you so much for being here. You remind me of my grandmother, who was also Cherokee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
All the family. Folks, please join us next week. Our guest is going to be neuroscientist and anthropologist, Dr. Peter Sterling. And Dr. Sterling has been recognized for his research on the connection between systemic oppression and chronic morbidity and mortality. He's going to speak with us about the relationship between racism and health disparities among communities of color. Please do visit our Facebook page, Race Talk Revolution, like our page. Please visit our YouTube page. We gave it a little facelift, Race Talk Revolution. Like your favorite video, become a subscriber. I just want to keep you. I don't want to let you go today, but I got to let you go. So Eugene, what do you say?
Oh man, do I have to say bye? Again, everybody, thank you so very much. And Freedom, we've been doing this for a year now. It's been a year this month, and you guys have made it possible. Thank you so much for your support by showing up. Continue to show up. All right. Thank you so much.